to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Noel Mcdermott, and I've got a grand old dame with us tonight. David Charkham is joining us, which is fantastic. David's a sort of an old mate from many years who's been sort of working in the addiction field. So we'll be hearing from him soon. I'll do my usual sort of furniture moving bit at the beginning, which is just to sort of welcome you. If you're listening to this on the 12th of January at the sort of 9 p.m. time, UK time, it's live, and we'd love to have you join in. And there's various ways you can join in. You can sort of pop questions into one of the streams that this is going out on, either on YouTube or on Facebook, and James, who's the techie guy, will have a look, and if he sees anything, he'll send it through to me. Or you can give us a call on my mobile, which is +44 7506 319 745. WhatsApp me, and actually, I may even get you on air. I'll make you famous. There you go. There's the deal. It'd be lovely to hear from you folks if you've got questions and comments that you want to share with us. Enough of that. Oh, just one thing. If it's outside of 9 p.m. on the 12th of January, between 9 and 10 p.m, it's not live, so don't call me, because it might be early in the morning. You might wake me up, and you might get a very grumpy version of me who's not at all happy. So during the live broadcast, it's great to hear from you. Enough of that. So David, welcome back. It's Happy New Year.
Happy New Year and good evening. Great to see you. I've had many descriptions and introductions. Grand old dame is probably the first time. Never mind about the grand or the dame, but it's the old.
Well, I'm sort of old as in the same generation as me, mate. I think
we've just finished Panto season.
Yeah, quite. So Grand Old Duke of York, but even that one, I think these days it's a bit dodgy to be called the Grand Old Duke of York, because there are various legal ramifications on that one. So let's step away from that one quick. But it's lovely to sort of have you on the show, and welcome to 2022. It's been a sort of weird old 2+ years. I mean, very, very strange times. And how have you been through all of that sort of pandemicing and all of that stuff? How have you found it?
I guess I've adjusted. It was difficult. It was kind of the old rebel in me at the beginning, just didn't want to obey anything. But I settled into the groove, and it was helped because we had a glorious summer.
Yes.
So it was it was okay, and I don't work every day, so I could do that, and I've adjusted to the world of Zoom.
Yeah.
But what I miss is, because my international work was always very, very busy. I mean, for me, it's very unusual. I've not been on a plane for 2 years, and I was always, not always, but maybe 8 to 10 trips times a year I'd be flying around. So I've missed that. I kind of almost detoxed from flying, almost.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I was looking at some, on Facebook. I don't know if you're on Facebook, but sometimes it posts old photos and old memories.
Yes.
It posted one from 6 years ago for me, which was a picture of a motor car that I'd hired in California. And I was like, bloody hell, has it been that long? And I used to go quite regularly, but it's been sort of, it does feel like there's been this sort of gap.
Absolutely.
Stuff, and I was saying to James just before the show went on air that, I mean, I've just come back from seeing my boy in France, and sort of up till now, it's always been it is a difficult transition, because I miss him, I get a bit sad and all that sort of stuff. But actually, the last couple of days have just been full on busy, a bit like the old days, and it sort of feels like that's the way it's going this year, that we're definitely moving away from that into whatever this new normal is. But certainly it seems to me it's got a lot busier and a lot more focused. So your tagline for this show was the rock and roll recovery coach, which is quite a mouthful. And so let's talk about sort of David Charkham before he was stable and well. Sort of how did the rock and roll recovery coach sort of emerge? What was the sort of broken wreckage of the past sort of thing?
Well, yeah, that's it.
From Phoenix, like, as it were.
Yeah, how did I pick myself up? Well, yeah, because my roots, you know, I was a child actor, and I had great failures at school. My dear, sweet, loving parents went to huge lengths to try to get me educated. Yeah. Now I look back, and I was a difficult child, a challenging child. But I think about it now, in my oldish age, and it was all about, I want your attention. I just wanted you. I wanted you to look at me. I needed attention. And they tried to get me educated. And they went to great lengths. And financially, they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know what to do with me. And I have this rather fragile, thin piece of paper. They took me to a child psychologist.
Okay.
In the 1960s, 1964, yeah. Because I wasn't fitting in. I wasn't 11 plus type. I guess it feeds into that feeling of feeling like a round peg in a square hole, way before any substances came into my life. And this psychologist really made a report that was to change the direction of my life. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. My family were in the rag trade. My contemporaries, that's what they did. They either went into the business, or being the classic Jewish family, accountants, lawyers, that kind of path. Mm-hmm. Finished school, get qualifications, uni. So this woman, she said, in a nutshell, she did an IQ test, and they discovered I was fairly bright. She said, he is bright, your son, but he's got a problem with authority. Yes. Right.
What a great diagnosis. That's it, nail on the head, right?
This is it. And this is not, she was a child, this is 63 or something. And then she said, there's one school that would understand your kid, because previously my parents had been taking me to interviews in public schools. And I remember as a kid, long drives, rugby fields either side, old buildings, wood panelings, smells of teachers, pipe smokes and gowns, and sitting there. And I'm so grateful none of them would have me. So this extraordinary school was run by Quakers. It was vegetarian. Remember, this is 64. There was no kind of fashion for veganism, and that's what they were doing for real. Homeopathic medicine, and I got in there. However, when I was accepted, they said, yeah, we'll take him, but he needs to go off and be crammed. And I don't know if that's even spoken about in the world of education, but you went in a bit like a battery hen. You went in a class of 6 and got crammed. God knows what they crammed into me. Anyway, I got pushed up to an acceptable educational level, and I went into St. Christopher's, Letchworth, Hertfordshire, it was a great school, but they believed in freedom. There was no...
It is a great school. I mean, to be honest, it is.
Yeah, great, because it's
very much about the liberal ethos of education.
Well, you know about it, but other people may not. No school uniforms, no corporal punishment. But boys and girls slept in the same house, not together, but in the same house, teachers by the first names. And what it did for me, they accepted that I was never going to be an academic, but there was the drama society, there was the opera society, there was the trad jazz band, there was all this kind of stuff. And it just allowed all my attention-seeking behavior. It didn't shut me down. It didn't try and push me into an area that wouldn't have worked. And I'm sure without that freedom, I'm sure I would have got into trouble. So, but at 15, before O-levels, apparently, I think this is not exaggeration, they said to my parents, look, Mr. and Mrs. Charkham, it's really a waste of time, David being here. It's a waste of time for him. for you, and it's also a waste of your money. So my education ended around my 15th birthday. And then I said, I know, I'll be an actor.
Right.
Now, there were no visions of the Royal Shakespeare Company. I didn't want to do Hamlet. I just thought, because you've got to remember, we're talking about the Beatles had just released Please, Please Me or Love Me Do. And one thing that my generation don't often speak about, I was the first generation of English men that didn't get conscripted into the armed forces.
Yeah, right, that's right. Yeah.
That's really my interpretation of why was there a 60s explosion, because they just let us be. Suddenly a youth should be listened to. God forbid you should wear suede shoes. And, you know, so the explosion, it was the music, it was the art, it was the fashion, it was the design, it was the architecture. So I was blessed to be right in the middle of that explosion. And I just went to this stage school. I was called Ada Foster's, and I think I got asked to leave there. Probably I'd upset someone, or I'd done something, can't quite remember what it was. Anyway, in a nutshell, long story short, by 15 and a half, I'm an employed actor. And I started on kids telly, and what were those things? Those mail order catalogs, all that kind of stuff, junior points of view. And then, but actually the first proper job, I was an understudy in a West End show at 15. I understudied The Healthiest Boy in the West End. I went on once in a year, but that was my apprenticeship. And at the drama school, my apprenticeship was, we worked in the local, it was called the Golders Green Hippodrome. So we worked in the box office, we worked in the flies, we worked on electrics, we worked on stage management, we sold ice creams. It was a complete kind of, because rep was not, it was fading out then, which was the actors, pre-drama schools and colleges and degrees for drama. You went into repertory, but I did that, and I got this understudy in a great show called Robert and Elizabeth. And then, you know, I didn't know now how successful I'd been until in 1986, when I ended up in rehab, completely broken. I didn't realize, I wasn't aware there were 98% of actors never earned a living, hardly earned a living.
That's right. Yeah.
I had gainful employment for about 15 years. And I got into my first show where I played, it called Passion Flower Hotel in the West End. I played Pauline Collins' boyfriend with a wonderful cast: Jane Birkin, Francesca Annis, Jeremy Clyde, me and Nicky Henson, and Bill Kenwright, that's right. And I just took off. I didn't know, I just took off. And then it didn't occur to me that there was anything special about being in the West End in the evening, and then I'd be doing something like Bless This House or Father Dear Father in the daytime. Yeah. So I've got to out to myself as a member of the cast of Crossroads, black and white version. I was also in that, which some people have a good laugh about.
And you were also in a couple of those things on the wall as well, weren't you?
Oh yeah, in the 68 I got into yes, you probably recognize me as an ape in 2001. I have less hair now, and then things really got serious when I got into hair in 1970, and it was a big part.
I mean, it's interesting sort of thinking about the role of the arts in both enabling but also supporting people who are maybe at risk. What we would say now, you were a child at risk at 15. You would be defined now. If you were 15, struggling the way you were, you'd be called a child at risk. I know that,
of course,
too. But the arts, and particularly theatre, and I sort of identify with it because that's the route I went as well.
Yes.
And I ended up in theatre, and like you, I ended up earning a living, which was, I didn't realize until afterwards that earning a living was unheard of, you know.
Absolutely.
Because you just didn't earn a living at theatre. But I did. I was always in work, and it sort of seemed to come relatively easily. But what it did for me was it gave me a community and a home,
and a sense of belonging, and
really
people that understood you. Yes,
it really did. And I was able to be the awkward, sort of slightly weird and slightly broken and slightly strange and challenging person, and that was all right.
Yeah,
because everybody was slightly like that in the theatre world, and it was sort of a tribe that could
very much. But did you ever get from people that didn't quite understand our strange world? Oh yes, but what do you do for a proper job?
Yeah, there was lots of that going on, but to be honest, I'm sort of, because I did find a place where I could fit in and where my oddities were okay. I sort of I moved more into that field rather than sort of listen to those. And I guess people just saw me as quite bohemian and artistic, and I guess I was.
Yeah.
You know. And so you're doing all this stuff, and then you mentioned that you ended up in rehab. So
Yes, I mean,
at some point, when did some of the unhelpful behaviours, such as using and drinking,
yeah.
When did they start to emerge, do you think?
Well, it's when did I start to recognize them? They emerged well before I recognized them, and they emerged where everyone around me recognized them, and I was the last. I mean, I described it as, so I'm getting high, or turning on, as one describes it, in the early 1960s with pot. And was I a drug addict or an alcoholic then? I don't think so. I was just an impressionable kid. My heroes were getting high, the Beatles and their rum and coke and their this and their that. But when I started my relationship with substances, I was controlling it. And all those years later, when I'm poured into Cloud's house in '86, it was using me. Yeah. And somewhere between then, the beginning and the end, I crossed the invisible line. And it took a long time, and I am amazed at what I got through and how I've come out the other side. I feel truly blessed with a gift, because as you and I know, there were so many casualties of my contemporaries. But I did. I love this. Is my description of showbiz in 3 lines. Who is David Charkham? Get me David Charkham. Get me a young David Charkham. Who is David Charkham? That's that kind of. So I started off as an understudy, and all those years later, I ended up as an understudy at the Royal Court Theatre, and I crossed the line. And then the last thing I did an audition at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. I don't know if you or any of the listeners have ever been on the stage of the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. It is big, and if there's no scenery, it's a great big black void. And out there, there was a director and an MD. I couldn't see anything, and it's known as a haunted theatre as well. It's kind of spooky, it's dark. And I remember a voice floating out of the store saying, "Oh yeah, what's your name? What are you going to do?" And that was the point when I went to speak and nothing came out.
Oh, wow. All right.
And that was the point when I thought, I just want the floor to open up and swallow me. I just walked out of that theatre, and I saw this other world that I knew I wasn't connected to. But I was and then I was unemployable, down and out. And then my father gave me a job. The only person that would employ me was my dad. And I ended up as a packer in his skirt factory in Soho. And, I had low self-worth, still a huge ego, mixed into this kind of cocktail of bitterness, but you don't know who I used to be. And I was packing skirts for a couple of years. And it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice. But I was blessed. I met Lama Bart when I was 16, and I knew him. You probably knew him as well, through ups and downs, from wealth, from Oscar winning to not being able to pay the milkman to bankruptcy. And the world of recovery was a lot more private then. Pre-Hello magazine, there were not celebrities talking about recovery, rehab, or anything. It was pretty undercover.
Okay, and I think it's become a sort of badge of honor these days, almost.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of like, in some ways, I think people might admit themselves simply because they can say they've been. But you were in this skirt packing.
Yes,
role, and you were still using, I guess.
God, I was still using, but it wasn't like, oh, let's get high this weekend. I was dependent. I was dependent on substances, on alcohol, on methadone, cough syrup, little bits of, I mean, it was just a mess.
Right.
And anyone else would have thrown me out on the street, but my dad, he didn't understand, but he gave me a job, and I could drive a car and deliver the skirts, but then I lost my license and I survived. But Lionel, God bless him, I had no idea about what recovery was. I knew Lionel used to use more than me, but when I saw him later on, he stopped. And no one talked about it. And I went to a doctor. My dad sent me to a doctor. He was a family friend. And it was those classic old doctors. Oh, as long as you don't drink as much as your doctor, you can't be that bad. I mean, it really was, old-fashioned stuff. He said, no, you've got a chest infection. Just take antibiotics. So, okay. I'm leaving, going out the door. And he says, oh, by the way, you can't drink for 10 days.
Yes, quite.
And that was a massive penny dropping experience. Because I thought, wait a minute, what does that mean, not drinking for 10 days? And then I thought, where can I go? Who do I know that doesn't do this? Because as addiction progresses within us, our world gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And it was a very small group of people that were all using as much as I was. I'll go to Lionel's. And I just hung out with Lionel. He didn't say a thing. He didn't pin me up against the wall. You're an alcoholic, as we know that can drive people away. But I got the power of a message that he was different and he was nicer to be around. And then to cut a longer story short, I go to the factory one day, I completely collapsed. And my father was away, and there was a really nice man called Chris who didn't understand, but he knew I was unwell. And I collapsed, and he started to call the Samaritans. He didn't know about anything else. And I said, no, wait a minute. Let me call Lionel. And Lionel just said, put him in a cab, send him to my little house in Ealing, because he'd fallen from a great house. He had a very modest masonette over an off license in Acton, actually. I get to Lionel, get buzzed in the door, and there's Lionel standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me, and he goes, Dave, you don't have to drink. Extraordinary thing to say. And then within 24 hours, I was in a clinic being detoxed. And then on the Monday, January 1986, I'm in rehab.
Yeah. And you went to
Cloud's House.
A very
Still going.
Place called Cloud's House, which is part of Action on Addiction.
And now part of the Forward Trust. They've just
right, yeah, which used to be the prison.
Yeah, that still is, but it's now all formed into one fantastic charity. And now, all these years later, I do workshops for Sharp, which is day programs. So anyway, that's my story. But I'm a 60s survivor.
Yeah,
and as you know, it was like we were in the front line there.
Yeah.
And of course, as you probably remember, there was the 35 Club. It wasn't scary to think that one's heroes were dying at 35.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, that's the previous. That's the preface.
It's often though, and I think there was a romanticism around this stuff, people dying of overdoses and things.
Sure.
But actually, there's nothing romantic about it when you're in it.
No way.
It's actually quite grim and quite sort of Groundhog Day-ish and depressing and anxiety provoking and
shame.
Yes. Yeah. And living with that sense of the fall from grace, which I guess was quite a challenge for you, because there's something about the arts and performance and being there is that we develop a great sense of ego about it.
Absolutely. And but the thought that pain was actually harder. I get into recovery, I follow the suggestions, do what I'm told, and then the ego starts to the ego fed antenna starts to come up, and I'm assuming, right, I've finished Clouds, I'm following the suggestions, I'm going to aftercare, and I'm doing the support network, and my career will come back. And that was really, really hard. My career didn't come back, and all I could do was get a job as an extra, and that was a fall from grace.
Yeah.
And there was resentment. I couldn't get my head around it at first. I really needed to talk to people who were further down the line. And the late, great Dudley Sutton was a fantastic influence on me, and he gave me great help and support when he saw me hanging around all day on the streets being extra. And I said, Daddy, I'm doing everything I'm told, but I can't get arrested as an actor. And what did Dudley say? He said, David, have you ever considered that there's a bigger plan for you today than you could possibly understand right now? And of course he was right, but the humility, for me, the hardest thing in Straight Outta Clouds, and I'm seething with this, but I should be this, I should be that. And I walk down Shaftesbury Avenue, I'd see the names in lights, and I'd go, that bastard was my understudy. And then there was the names above the lights, above the title, presented by that producer. He was the third assistant stage manager when I was in Jesus Christ Superstar. I had to deal with that and get real and grow up.
It's an interesting thing, and it's a conversation that we'll loop back to when we talk about your current projects. But there's that interesting thing when you're downriver in addiction, which is where you were, and people fish you out at that point just before you end up in the sea and dead. That's the metaphor, you know. That's the last possible moment for you in that history and out in the sea, and there's no rescue at that point. But it's often a common experience, I think, that people get fished out, dried out, sorted out, put back on their feet, and then make this assumption, well, I'm going to go back to the way it was, just not do all the nonsense. Because there's almost a sense in which time hasn't passed while you're using. And then you wake up like 20 years down the line, and you're still 20 years in the past.
It's like Adam Man. Remember that TV series? The guy was frozen in ice, and it melts 20 years later. Absolutely. But I hit a crossroads, and you either have to get up and brush yourself off, dust yourself off, and just get on with it, or I could sit and whinge and just shrivel. But things happened, and I fell into the most extraordinarily unexpected world, and which has given me a career of 30 years.
Rock and roll recovery.
Oh, the rock and roll stuff came about. I mean, I got a poster. Me, the uneducated boy, not even a tap dancing certificate, got sent to the CNW or St Mary's, Paddington, the drug dependency unit, by the City of Westminster, because this sounds so crazy, but I was living in Pimlico, and there was a sign in the library saying help needed to help addicts in Westminster. And I remember writing to this committee in City Hall, and I had started doing some workshops, because my strap line then, and it still is, now that you've stopped, how do you stay stopped? And I started as an experiment doing workshops, because another far-sighted woman who, you know, if you talked about drama therapy in 1986 or acupuncture or art therapy or music therapy, it's like, whoa, this is witch doctor stuff. But she was far-sighted, and she said to Dudley, you're an actor, you're recovering from your addiction, you've got great communication skills, come and talk to these men. And he said one line that changed my life: I'm too busy, but there's a guy called David Charkham. And I started working, which was the CDC, which is the forerunner of Action on Addiction, at Thurston House, Men's Halfway House, thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do with these people? And the book they gave me was by somebody with titles after their name, which immediately I felt less than. So I sat there, saw these men just out of rehab, and I remembered, what would someone like to talk to me about when I'm let out of a bubble, a lovely, protective, understanding, gentle, sensitive bubble, living with people all on the same journey. When you leave, it's a hell of a shock. It's a rude awakening. Yeah. And I started a group, and then I sent a letter to the City of Westminster that was probation and the police and the social services, because this is the strangest thing I'm going to say, is they were just realizing that AIDS wasn't just the gay plague. Yeah. They were just realizing that addicts, needlers, that was AIDS. So they were in dire straits. No one understood at the beginning, and they paid. I won't name this hugely successful PR company, but they paid them a lot of money, and they hung yellow ribbons from lampposts in Park Lane. They hired Frank Bruno, bless him, to go to schools and say, don't take drugs. And they gave out.
I remember him doing that, to be honest.
You know, so they said to me, we think you got
Poor
something.
Frank could barely string a sentence together.
I know, but that's what it was all about. I didn't know they'd been spending hundreds of thousands. They said, look, David, we think you've got something. This is where the addicts are, Paddington, St Mary's drug dependency unit. And remember, all those units in those days were hidden. There were prefab huts hidden at the back with the sexual diseases department. It was all like dirty, untouched stuff. And they said, we think you've got something, talk to them. If they like you in that drug unit, we'll fund you for 3 months. And they did. And all I did was share my experience, hope and strength and talk to them. I've been there and this is my story. And some of them, and they gave me the hardest, slipperiest bunch of manipulative method street addicts. And I'm happy to say 3 of them got into treatment within 3 months. And that led to it.
And were you using then your sort of theatre and drama skills?
Absolutely. Right. Still now, when I do stuff on Zoom with Castle Craig up in Scotland. You know, it's a performance. Yeah. Not like, hey, look at me. It's like, I want to reach people. I want to see their eyes. It's not so easy on Zoom. And I want them. And when I went to China, they couldn't understand my title. So I said, well, you know, I'm a hope carrier. They got that. Yeah. So, hey, and as for the rock and roll recovery business, I, in 2000, got befriended by a very famous pop star. I had to work out, being an old 60s guy, I had to really work out the difference between rock star and pop star. And he just wanted to be my friend. And remember, the word recovery coach, sober companion hadn't been invented in this country. No one knew what the hell that meant. And my father had just died. I was a bit lost. And he said, well, I'm going on a world tour. Will you come with me? And this chap really needed a dad. He needed a kind of sponsor. He needed someone who's sober. He needed someone to explain about the benefits of the self-support groups. And I went around the world with this young man. And that was an extraordinary journey. And it worked very well. He stayed well. I stayed well. And I saw the world. And because by the time I got back, word had got out that there's somebody that can work with these people. And my
what it makes you think of is I think of that story you tell about, you know, you have the collapse at work at your dad's factory. And there was one person you knew who was sober that you could go to and they could guide you. And here you are many years later, in a sense, performing that role as well to people to sort of...
Yes, I think one of the reason really for the success, I think, is that, and I've seen it with this expanding world of the recovery support coaching network, degrees, exams, certificates. I never wanted the quote, the fame stardust to fall on me. I didn't want their fame. You know, I'm happy to do my job quite quietly, you know, be in the background. I didn't want, I might get discovered, or maybe
let's talk about that more, David, because there is a thing about, I mean, sort of recovery coaching, as anybody can call themselves it these days, and it's one of the issues in treatment at the moment is the sort of dumbing down of services by people coming in without qualifications who don't know what they're doing, whose only qualification is they haven't used today, which is okay, great, well done. But that's not really what you did, and you're sort of in your determination to entertain, which I understand because you're an entertainer, you're an actor, you're a performer. You're skimming over some of the actual graft that you put into creating things. So I'm going to come back to. So you did some theatre. Well, I talk to people like Michael, for example, at Clown's House, right?
Yes.
Michael, who I'm talking about. And he's an extraordinary guy who has many really solid clinical years in the field. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he talks very highly about the way you approach your work. And what you don't do is just, I mean, you're quite charismatic in this conversation, but you're not a charismatic healer. You actually think very carefully about the work, and you put structured programs together.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Follow the evidence. I know that about you. So let's do that a little bit, because you don't need to entertain us. Let's talk about some of the.
So I try and calm down. I just want to say I did do 22 years in the National Health Service.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
Oh, by the way, I did that.
The whole point is that you're skimming over that stuff.
Okay, and I did coordinate all the detox in Chelsea, Westminster, and Westminster for 20 years.
So you're not, you know, yeah, exactly. So let's talk about that, because you have solid work ethic, and you have a solid work, and you don't get to work in the NHS for the amount of time that you did and be a fruitcake. It's just the two are not compatible, because the NHS is a world-beating organisation that has the top clinical work going on, right? So let's talk about that. What did you do in the NHS? What sort of program?
Okay. Well, the interesting thing is, because I had no qualifications, when the Westminster money ran out, I mean, I'm maybe you can identify, there's been people in my life that understood what was going to, the talent that I had that I didn't know I had. They knew I had a gift. I didn't know I had this gift where I was sort of like, I could reach people and bring them hope and encourage them to take those risks. But one of the managers said, David, we've got to secure you in the National Health. You'll go out, we'll get you some money, there'll be a budget, and you'll be gone. And unbelievably, because I had to be paid under the ANC rule, a minister and clerical, I had to be paid as a secretary.
Yeah.
You know what they did? They created a post for me in the NHS.
That's right.
Charkham, life skills and inpatient coordinator. And I started teaching life skills and assessing people and trying to convince people in trouble that a detox wasn't a cure.
Exactly.
And just detox takes the medication out of you. That's when the work starts. So that's what I did. But the mixture of that and the showbiz stuff, and this was a great grounding for my future and the travellers and the kind of high profile people I worked with since. Is on a Monday, I work in the NHS in a methadone clinic. On a Tuesday, I'll be on a private jet with someone doing some show. Wednesday, I'll be back in the clinic. So I was able to see and understand that this condition, this illness, this awful addiction, doesn't matter whether you're on the streets of Paddington and whether in your own private jet, it's
going to take you out. Full stop.
The loneliness and the depression was actually the same.
Yeah. And that approach, this sort of rigorous approach that you have, where you're combining, you know, lots of heterogeneous skills to help people.
I don't even know what that word means. Hetero,
yes, quite.
Heterogeneous.
Definitely not hetero, David, although you have a wife, but there you go. From a multiplicity of sources.
Okay, gotcha.
A bit like weaving a cloth.
Yes.
You have lots of different threads.
Yeah.
Put them together and to make a coherent pattern in a cloth. Now, that's quite a skill to be able to do that. For a lot of people, it just ends up as a bundle of twine in a mess, right? But you've never done that. You've always been able to, I think, see the patterns and weave appropriately and work with the various sort of influences and bring them to you. Because, as your psychologist said, he's a clever bloke. He just doesn't like being told what to do.
You mean I'm not the only one?
No, you're not the only person. But obviously one of the things that people saw, and one of the things I can see in you as well, is that give you a head of steam and give you a space, you're going to create something really, really helpful and useful for people, because that's who you are. If you try and put a bit in your mouth, you're just going to chomp at that and end up not doing very much, right? But it is interesting, and I wonder where this comes from in you. You're not satisfied with just producing pap. It seems to me it's important to you that what you do is quality, is real, and genuinely helps, and is measurable in its helpfulness. And where does that come from in you? Because you know, I mean, I understand it as an artist, because I worked in theatre as well. And you work very hard in theatre to produce good quality stuff. And actually live theatre is quite a crucible. You can't produce crap on stage live because it's horrific. You've got to be good at it.
Found out very quickly.
So that's right. It's not pleasant at all. It's not a pleasant experience. So I get it from that perspective. Where did this come from in you, though? Do you think this?
I don't know. I think there's a path and there's a journey and there's something that I'm here. I'm meant to be doing this, and I'm almost surprised hearing myself say it. I never ever planned it. I never thought it was going to be my world. I never thought I would end up working in this field.
I don't mean that so much, because I get the idea that you found the other way, as it were. You followed your heart and you followed a dynamic path in your life, and it's not been a sort of a thought out plan, but you've responded. No, this idea that whatever you do, you want to do it well.
I want people to have look what's happened to me. Right. I felt the wings of the angel of death above my head several times, and I was the width of a Rizzler cigarette paper away from overdosing several times. Yeah. And something looked after me, something protected me. And when I see people who have no hope and think it's all over, I can share my experience and explain that anything is possible, but you can't do it on your own.
Yeah. Okay. And it's interesting because I don't know. I mean, I think you feel similar things to me about the current coaching, so-called recovery coaching community. Yeah. But it's largely fluff that people just don't really do very much, and they expect to get paid tons of money to do nothing. So
it's another world. I'm someone very kindly said, I think it was Ian Young who called me the grandfather of recovery coaching. Yeah. Hey,
I called it that in our conversation in France. I talked to you about grandparenting, and then
you did, yes, thank you.
You keep saying this thing about I don't have qualifications, and I'm like, well, most professions started off with what we call grandparents who didn't have qualifications, but they plowed a furrow. And then all professions have this thing called a grandparenting process, where we don't expect the grand old dames like yourself to go off and get qualifications. You're qualified by experience, commitment, right?
I've got my chops or whatever they call it. But I just, the other thing about, do you want me to talk? What have we got? We've got 15 minutes. There's the rock and roll stuff that I'm known for, and because it's all an anonymous profession, of course it is, but the only person that's outed me, and I just love him and I love the family, and he wrote my reference on LinkedIn, is Ozzy Osbourne, who I love.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, he did. Hey, you want a reference? Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, Dave saved my life 4 times on tour. I love it. I love him, and I worked with him. I was Ozzy's sober companion. Went around the world on the last 3 Black Sabbath tours. And we had a wonderful time, and I became friends with the family. I stayed with the family, and I was in stage school with Sharon when we were at stage school brats. But he outed me, and it was a wonderful relationship. And again, I saw the world, and he's a dear friend, and I think about him often. But my name spread on that in that area. But I want to mention 2 things, and I know that you talk with Matt about the outside edge.
I'm just going to bring us to outside edge because I think it's really vital.
Hopefully your listeners know all about it, but it's a theatre company. I've been a patron and a trustee and a patron for over 26 years now, and the most wonderful outside edge theatre company that anybody can attend. It's free. You just need to be drug free on the day. And I've watched it, and I'm delighted. I managed to, I invited Jimmy Page to join me, and we're co-patrons, and he supports it fantastically. It's for anybody who either has an inkling, who's interested in theatre or writing or the creative arts, not just, I'll get in this and I'll get on telly and be a star. But the thing about addiction, crippling low self-worth goes with addiction, and it's about giving people confidence, and now it's doing pretty well, and the Royal Court got involved. So please, Edge TC, I think is the website.
James will put the website up. We know it well
because we managed to get Pierce Brosnan and fantastic Mark Rylance to support it, and I'm proud to be involved with that. So I wanted to just mention it.
But one of the great things I think about what you do is that you use this sort of rock and roll stuff to
Yeah.
bring in these high profile figures into supporting real work again. And it's, I'm glad that you're promoting it at the moment, but often you don't. You often sort of, again, you do this sort of entertainment thing, and you skim over the actual, the genuine graft that you put into your craft and to your art. And I know that you put that work in, and I admire you for it and respect you for it. We sort of, so Outside Edge undoubtedly is an extraordinary project, and the current artistic director, Matt, is fantastically.
Fantastic. Yeah, and so please look that up. But it kind of brings me round to the other end of what I'm doing now, and I'm really proud to be one of the clinical directors of the Revoke program by Animo Healthcare, which timing is everything. It happens to be opening on Saturday. But
that's the website, so James can put that out. Have you got your?
Yes, that's Animo Healthcare, Revoke at Animo, and that's Michael Ishmael, David Small, and myself have come up with a program. This is hopefully to catch people before it gets so bad they need detox or they need residential rehab. And it's worked, it's crafted and thought out really carefully. So it's 2 evenings a week. So you can still be working, and you can do this very anonymously, and you can come on a Saturday, and it's a 3-month program. And as I say, I'm excited to be involved. And
tell me about the program, what it offers.
Well, the program will be group, it will be one-to-ones, there'll be a little bit of drama therapy, and it's very gentle. There'll be introductions and discussions on choices that you can make, informed choices that you can make, and then towards the end of into the 3rd month, about where else can you go for support. And I'll do my work about talking about what's on offer, and what about developing a social circle, and trying to convince people that there are other things than getting high. It's not uncool not to use and use my experience. But the idea
behind this is it's on rock solid ground, because
we've got a lot between us. The 3 of us have got, I think, 80 years as professionals, and our joint sort of recovery journey is 90 years between the 3 of us. So we've been around the block. But what great timing, because of the government report that came up a couple of weeks ago. Okay, there were bigger dramas it was forgotten about, but it was published, and they're talking about there's the addicts and there's the gang wars and county lines. What about the quote unquote lifestyle users? What about that group? I think, oh yeah, well, we can take away their driving license and take away their passports. And I'm quoting because it's called the middle class lifestyle users. Well, they can talk to us. We can invite those people into group, because that kind of using doesn't just normally fade away. And then we think about the cost to them, and then we think about the cost to the employees, and about the investment. If it goes out there and the human resources understand what we're on offer here, we can help people remain employed. We can help people go back into work, working much more sharply. And you and I know, and the public knows, the increase of substance abuse through lockdown has gone through the roof.
Alcohol-related deaths have trebled.
That's gone through the roof. But we think about this huge working community who have some kind of impairment around substances.
Well, it's also, I think, the work from home stuff has facilitated this using.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things that used to happen to me was I'd go to work, and because I was at work, I had to behave, because other people were around.
Yeah. But that I understand that, but there are certain cultures, perhaps in the city or banking or trading and all those things, and perhaps the understanding of behaving is something quite different.
Yeah, although I tend to think it's less of a culture now, because
I hope so. I hope
it is. So. I mean, I think the idea that you could be on the trading floor and go and get trashed during lunchtime and come back is no longer the case, because
I hope so.
I think so. But the idea of catching people before they go far downstream, and we introduced this metaphor early on,
Yes.
that you were way down the river and you were almost out in the sea before people hauled you out. And it's almost like what happened was this, you were hauled out, you were dried out, SpongeBob sort of shrunk and all the liquids went out of you, but your mindset was still 20 years in the past and you found it massively difficult to adjust. So I guess what you're saying to people is the sooner you step in, the less of that reparative work that you have to do. You actually can just continue with your life the way you want it to. You aren't faced with a crisis of the world has moved on and I was somehow stuck in some sort of capsule by drug and drinks, and it's possible, and we know this from evidence that it actually works, doesn't it? The consequences are fewer for people the sooner they can step in. What sort of things, maybe if somebody is listening and they're thinking, should I come? I don't know, should I come? I mean, is there a way that you would suggest that people should think about whether or not?
They can think about it, and there's a phone number they can call for an assessment. I mean, even some of the situations will be what I call just seed planting. They may come and attend and may not change then, but the seed's being planted. And again, that thing, this is your social life. Do you know any people that you like that don't use substances? Where might I find them? So there's a kind of helpline number, and an assessment, an initial assessment will be available, and then if necessary it goes further with medical directors, psychiatric assessments, etc., that may not be needed, but we have that, and we have great experience.
So one of the things that you can offer to people is that they can pop along and go, well, I'm a little bit worried, but I don't know if I should be.
Well, they could talk to us, absolutely. They could make a call to the main number, and talk to my colleague and one of Michael or David, and see. But at least it's engaging, it's starting. Because I've done a few promotional videos or videos about my work, but the one I'm most proud of is on. I can't remember what it's on, but it's called. It's a short film. Is your drinking costing you more than money?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's out there on the net, and that explains about a lifestyle. That explains about, is your social life actually not as good as you think it is?
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, I just wanted to finish. What I talk about is you may look like the swan gliding elegantly along the top of the surface. You are paddling like crazy underneath.
Yeah.
At the end, I go, well, why are you watching this in the first place?
I mean, one of the things I often talk to people about is, how bad does it need to get before you want to do something about it? And do you really want to wait until it's that bad? What is the harm in just going to figure and try something out and have an assessment anyway? Just before we sort of begin to look at wrapping up, what is that number that people can call? And James can.
The number is, he said in very small writing, 0207 060 9517, 0207 060 9517, and it's Revoke by Animo Health Care.
So, folks, if you're wondering, maybe I need to sort of have some objective outside assessment of this, give me a call.
Sure.
And sort of you would know from the last hour of chatting with David, he's a good guy, and sort of he's not prone to panicking, and he's prone to drama. You're prone to drama, but that's just, I mean, that's your background, mate. That's your stock in trade, isn't it? But you've got enough sort of experience in this thing to be able to sort of guide people.
And we also have the advantage of having our clinic right in St James's, just off the Haymarket. So
the other thing as well, I think, because one of the I think big issues and big problems with recovery communities is that they tend to be attached to specific peer support organizations, and they tend to be focused on people who've gone far down in the problem and are quite severe in the problem, unless you go to some of the young people's meetings, which might pick up people sooner. And so it seems to me there is a need for people to be able to be providing support and services to folk who don't necessarily need the full shebang of recovery.
Right. It's support and never having to be alone again.
Yeah.
Because that's the darkest place, when you're on your own. And for some people, some of our workshops will be learning to ask for help.
Yeah.
And people may have grown up. A problem shared is a problem doubled. They may not have had a supportive family environment where someone might say, well, tell me what's going on here.
Yeah.
For some, it's not natural to say, well, actually, I hurt.
Yeah. And I think that idea of sort of intervening in people's lives, because they're probably at the stage, I'm sure, where they're using substances to manage feelings and relationships and stuff like that.
Oh, yes.
And actually having that intervention where you can reorient that and bring them back. Do you connect into, and I don't know what you think about this, but there is a growing now sober social life that's emerging.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I encourage that, because I didn't know how to do anything without a drink or a drug.
Yeah.
And now it's so much open. It's sober holidays, or sober golf, or sober outings, sober moves, just like-minded people, because there was a sober disco, or so, you know, there's a life. It's okay, but I had to learn.
And it seems to me, particularly amongst young people who are getting the message about health and well-being much better than my generation did, for example.
Oh, yes.
This all fits in with that idea that embracing a healthier way of living is actually about being happy, and it's about sharing things with people, and it's about feeling healthier, less depressed, less anxious, and also getting into a healthy relationship with your own body. And
absolutely, because the strap line of the year so far is well-being. It's all about well-being and self-empowerment and self-care. Sure.
Great. Well, look, we have reached the end. I told you we would be able to talk about Revoke and everything. Folks, I can't sort of recommend both the Davids. I know David Smallwood as well, really good people with a lot of experience in them. I'm personally very excited by Revoke, because I think that's the direction of travel that services in this area need to go. There is a preponderance of services that are, if you like, at the sort of the mouth of the river as it goes into the sea, because there's a lot of money to be made out of people who are that ill, and there's a sort of huge multi-billion-dollar treatment industry which is of no use to anybody at all. Whereas what you're offering, David, this earlier intervention, the evidence is it clearly is much more effective than waiting until people have washed downstream. Yeah. Because treatment of chronic users is so much more difficult than treatment of less chronic users. It's that simple. And so I can't sort of big up this enough, to be honest. I think it's exactly what we need to be seeing happening more in the sector. So I'm very excited about the project. I'm very excited that you're here, and sort of really want to sort of tell people that this is great. This is what needs to be happening, because sort of, I mean, you know what I think about addiction treatment. It's sort of very, very low opinion on the whole sort of. But this type of approach is exactly what's needed, and so I'm really excited that you're here. James will have put the both the phone number and the website. Is there anything before you go, because we do have to finish, but is there anything before you go that
one thing I do want to say, I believe there is a place for residential treatment. There is a place, and in my experience of working with treatment centres around the world, there's some very good ones out there for people that will need 6 to 8 weeks residential. So, and there was a purpose for that, but the people that we were aiming for or inviting to contact us, they haven't got there yet, and they may never have to. So
I don't disagree with the idea of, like, for example, places like Clown's House undoubtedly are great places. But I think my point is this: there's a lot more money to be made out of having a shoddy treatment service that doesn't really do anything. The numbers of places that are good are small in comparison to the total number of places that exist. And it, as a field, it's not regulated. And it,
well, the CQC do to protect a lot of organisations, but reporting anyway. I get what you're saying, but thank you for having me, and thank you for your enthusiasm about our project. And we think we've found something that can help a lot of people demystify this awful condition of addiction.
Without doubt. And I think the earlier we intervene in people's lives, the better. It's that simple. And folks, if you're concerned about your using, then give them a call. And that help-seeking behaviour is fundamental. Asking for help is the fundamental skill that people need to learn around this stuff, because it becomes disastrous because you fantasize you can manage it on your own, and you can't.
Right. And of course, the effect of the families and the loved ones. Let's not forget about that.
Today.
Well.
That's for another show. For now, we have to finish. David, you stay there. It's been tremendous to have you on this week. I'm really, excited that you're here, and really excited for you in this new endeavour. It's a fantastic thing. So you stay with us. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed the show. It's been great to be back with you. We're going to leave it there for now, and then come back with another great show next week. So thank you all for joining us, and see you in a week's time. Bye-bye.